This is Jeremy Swinger with the Rice Trader, summarizing the March 11th TRT report. It's a pleasure to come back to you and just talk about the market. As we've promised, we've now increased a little bit each week on our technology and have a new camera and new video and also new microphones. So hopefully it'll be a little bit clearer as we spend a little bit of time looking at the Rice Trader, talking about data and some of the key updates for the week. Just on that note, enough of my face on here. Let me share my screen and let's talk a little bit about the Rice Trader, which is a very active week. There's a lot going on this week with a lot of USD reports coming, and the market's in a lot of volatility. And that's what I see is this overall market depression is starting to affect things. In key, I'm going to start out with USDA's estimates of some of the crops because I just think they're so important. And as I try to go down here and just look at some of the things I see, I'm going to run right to that. Some of these key graphs that we see about what's going on in the global market. So in that, just to start out with, what did USDA do for overall global stocks? And these are a little bit small for my liking. In fact, I think I'm going to show it a little bit better. I'm going to view it a little high or zoom just to get it to our clients. Let's go significantly higher here so you guys can see it a little bit more. But just to look, they've taken global imports down to one of the lowest levels since 2015 for rice. Production, they've taken over 500,000 or million metric tons for the first time in history. And due to this change in the Indian crop, which they took up to 116, that really comes out of India. Global stocks are estimated 4 million metric tons higher this month for rice, which takes it to a massive level. And in fact, I even underlined this in the report how massive it is. You're talking about stocks that have now gone to 172 million metric tons, up 4.6 in the month. And that's just rice alone. And this includes in that 116 million metric tons. This is China, as we've talked about in the past. Obviously, China's carrying a large percentage of this, almost too high of a percentage. And if you take China out, it's still large stocks, even with China taken out, but definitely not as large. But as I said in this, several phone calls, several talks in China kind of vet this data out. So in addition to the stocks, what else are we seeing? And I write this in here after some thought. We saw a 3 million metric ton increase in the wheat stocks on the month to a record. And just to put it in perspective, that's 270 million metric tons. We saw soybeans also increased by about 3 million metric tons, to a massive 107 million metric tons compared to last year of just 98. I mean, that's a near 10 million metric ton increase in the soybean supply globally. So that's what I see just as a big overview of the dichotomy happening. On one level, you have such negativity of global supplies and rice everywhere. On the other hand, you're in the midst of an El Nino that usually says crops won't quite be as good. Several analysts are questioning if they can be really 100 or 500 million metric tons for the first time in history for rice. You definitely have the ability. You definitely have the water in most places. There is definitely some dryness in classical El Nino places, such as South America. So it remains to be seen. Definitely in India, it looks like there's going to be an amazing crop. Definitely in the U.S., which has a farm bill that's going to push high-yielding, low-quality rice. And it's the one few of the major grains that a grower can grow with no risk, because he's got such a massive guarantee due to the U.S. Farm Bill guaranteeing $14 a hundredweight. So overall, it's very negative, but the weather is a big concern. And we see that this week, and I like the way this started out. It's not all doom and gloom. For sure, it's not all doom and gloom. We just have to watch it very close because there is a lot of negativity when we look at this. There's negativity that is affecting the overall market. There's negativity that's affecting us all, really. And as you go through here, there definitely is some demand. We see some burn-off demand out of Vietnam, and you see some of these prices out of Vietnam for sure, pulling in business. So there's a lot happening at this time. Very much some interest out of a lot of the normal origins, whether that's Iraq, the Philippines, and you see it in this week as the trade starts to trade. And if we just go down, what are we seeing in price? Again, it's really Vietnam that's leading the way. In fact, they've come up a little bit in price, which I'm not sure they can hold with this talks of major stocks. This has been a pullback on huge amounts of demand as the other origins came in. It is going to be under pressure because the other major grains will continue to be under pressure unless there is harvest issues. And I'll talk about the U.S. in a little bit. In addition to that, and again, I really like the highlights that the team does for you. In a day and age where we're trying to save time and move forward, these really help us to try to summarize what's happening in the various markets and what's going on in the various trade flows. And what are we highlighting? If you just go back to the top page there really quickly, you always can see what are the weekly sections we're doing. Of course, we have an update in Nigeria and Iran and the USDA data, which we've shown. And of course, we do the major each month, such as Thailand, Vietnam, India, Pakistan, US. We go very in-depth in their data, and this week is Thailand. And there's a lot of really cool and interesting things to see in the Thai report. So saying that, again, a lot of things happen in alliance supply and demand factors, and definitely you're seeing it in the price. You're seeing some Asian origins go down, and Vietnam has just gotten really hit with demand, which I like to watch week to week. And this is why I love Table 3, as we call it, where we look at the demand so far this year. Well, you can see, and let me stretch this graph to show, you're off nearly 16, 70% on the year already. It's an extremely slow start. The first quarter is going to be extremely negative unless we see some major revisions in estimates versus official. We've heard it from the trade. It's definitely slow. Vietnam is definitely going to catch up with demand that's not being shown here in March and April. Bookings have been very heavy in Vietnam. In fact, they may just be smart enough to get ahead of this market as long as these crops come in. So now I'm going to move just in the last few minutes to the U.S. and USDA data, just because it's so interesting. And I've talked about and show this one very, very keen in the data. We have the smallest level of exports out of the U.S. since 1997. So this is something we've been saying significantly, why this is an opportunity for a lot of our friends in Asia. And it's definitely happening where Asia and South America are taking U.S. customers. And we show a very nice table of imports in the U.S., which are up 14% on the year to 900,000 tons just into the U.S., making it one of the largest and key origins in the world right now for imports. Definitely seeing the U.S. struggle. And this is a long time coming, not to complain or go into a country-by-country strategy, but this push for hybrid rice with no quality, just yields, it hasn't worked in India. It hasn't worked in China for the domestic market. You can't just grow for yield if you want customers to buy. And the Farm Bill is going to make this much worse because growers are looking for ways just to survive, and rice contracts will allow them to, even if the government is supplying as much as 25, 30% of their income due to direct payments. So definitely a big concern. And let's just show a couple of those graphs before we end our summary for the week. And head down to the end. Again, there's a lot in this report. I just I'm going through it very quick, just because I could sit here for so many hours and just go through all of the good data the team shows as you look at the high quality and just immense data of looking how things have changed over time, by month, by period. It's just such good, rich data for those who are watching the market. And hats off to our team. And just showing, in detail by country the top movements is just a key factor. But let's go into that piece because I think it affects Asia so much. And, of course, we have these other pieces which are interesting to me, the Japan tenders which occurred and, the Australian crop being off and, just the immensity of water that's happening in the U.S. California graph is just an example of that water. But a graph I really, really liked this week myself was this one. I just put it together a few minutes ago. It really highlights kind of the issue that we see when you look at U.S. trade being off 19% on the year and being the smallest level since 1997. It's not just that it was the smallest level. If you also look, this includes 157,000 tons of Iraqi business. That's strict political trade. With that not in there, they would be off massively. But even if with it in there, they're off 9% in the Middle East. They're off 19% in Mexico on the year. They're off massively, 15% in Asia as well. The U.S. is just having major issues. And this import graph shows this. There's 500,000 tons, more than 500,000 tons being imported from Thailand. Again, making it one of Thailand's key areas. India's moved 186. And these next two are fascinating because it shows what's happening. Brazil is 57,000 metric tons, and China, of all things, has exported to the U.S. At the time that the U.S. has been kind of barred from importing into there. Although, just as a side note, this has changed this week. Illegal exports to China are now going to be allowed in the U.S. with a 25% tariff, but they are technically allowed, although for those in the market, U.S. is actually, medium grain is actually classified also as long grain due to a weird internal Chinese way of looking at the kernel. So there is a lot of complications in U.S. trade. Obviously, U.S. is about $200 a ton higher before freight on an FOB basis than the Asian levels, making it very, very difficult. California is almost double the price. In fact, it is double the price of normal indica rice, and even other medium grain sales are much, much cheaper, $300 to $400 cheaper a ton than California rice. But the imports have increased just so dramatically. The exports have dropped so dramatically. And again, you're just going to see a very, very, very large crop. And again, this is layered upon massive stocks in wheat, massive stocks in corn, massive stocks in soybeans that are growing. This is why it's so difficult for me to get bullish, and why in Dubai I was negative, why in the World Conference I was negative. There is demand happening. There is times where people have to cover. But these are things before these crops hit the market again. And so we're going to be adding stocks, and people are going to be looking. And people could get in some real difficult cash flow issues. At a time, as we've talked, I expect China to export more than the U.S. in the coming year. The U.S. may get bumped out of the top 5 major exporters in the world in 2019 on increased China exports and some of the other smallers coming up. That's how severe this issue is, and worthy to spend a little bit of time in our TRT report and looking at the official data. But again, I can only summarize this. Super spent an immense amount of time, on the Asian pieces, talking about the trade, all the things going on, watching vessels. This is just a quick summary as I speak of what we're seeing in the market. Prices have been a little higher in some origins, a little lower in others. A lot of stuff going on, interesting data occurring. Just very much a summary of the market. And so I'm sure many of you will spend a lot of time looking at the graphs, looking at the summaries, and have questions, hopefully. But we're just here to try to help, and hopefully this summary is part of that help. But with that, we've also announced the World Conference for 2019. It's going to be in the Philippines, which is really not a surprise, since the trade wanted us to have it in this key location that has opened up for the first time really in history. It's the first time in 10 years we've been back to the Philippines. So it's about time as well for us to allow the Philippines to host and just be our wonderful hosting country in the coming year. And we're also looking to make it larger and make it better for you. For those of you who have suggestions, there's a lot of interest even on the research side to come and to present thoughts on world research and sustainability and water, in addition to key things on trade. So I think the World Conference is going to be amazing this year. It's November 11th to 13th. And I'm really looking forward to seeing all of our friends back in Asia in just a few months. So with that, I'm just going to go back here, stop sharing, and get to the bigger screen. Anyway, I appreciate it every week. And this is just Jeremy's Winger and the Race Trader Summary. I apologize if I went a little longer this time, but there's just a lot happening, and I think it deserves more of a longer summary. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys next week, and have a nice weekend.